I think what it really comes down to, it doesn't matter if it's intentional or unintentional. If you're on the other side, you're a victim, right? You're
Yeah.
still the one that was hurt by this. And it doesn't mean that you have to continue to deal with it. They need help. They need to fix this. It's still not a healthy trait. There's something wrong and they're pushing their own agenda and they're not being upfront about it. Some people have just said, well, that's just lying. It's not the same because it's a consistent over and over tactic. There's still something going on. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, I guess that's still to be debated. Hi, I'm Kirsten Franklin.
And I am Tiffany Denny.
And we are the Relationship Recovery, and we help people all over the world navigate and heal from relationship turmoil.
Because we have walked it ourselves, we create a unique experience to help you not only heal, but thrive in all areas of your life.
All right, let's get started. Hi, Tiff. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good. Just excited to talk about our topic today.
Yep, it's a big one, so I'm excited too.
Yeah, it is a big one. It is a trending one. At least it's very trendy to us. We see it a lot. I've noticed it outside of our world quite a bit too. Like it's everywhere from political conversations to discussions about TV producers and those in Hollywood to just everyday discussion. And I think it's good, but I also think there's a lot of misinformation out about this term and the terms gaslighting. And like I said, sometimes it's used correctly, sometimes it's used incorrectly. But what most people may not know is it can be a manipulative tactic and it can be something that people unknowingly do. And we're going to talk a little bit about both sides of the coin.
Yeah. And I think it's important that, most people don't even know where the term comes from. So I think we should talk about that, give a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good to have some background as to where it even comes from, where it's such a random term. A lot of people don't even understand what it is and why it's called that. So I love that. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the background.
Okay. So it's the term gaslighting actually came from a movie that was done like in 1944. And the husband, he's trying to steal his wife's inheritance and he convinces her that she's imagining things when she starts to notice his odd behavior, she's like, something's off here. But what he does is he'll go up into the attic and their lights are powered by gas and they'll start to flicker. So he's up in the attic looking for jewels that he thinks, are hidden up there. But he convinces her that she's imagining things. And gradually those lies and that manipulation make her and other people question her sanity. And so that's really where that term comes from. But it's also become a useful term for what goes on in emotionally abusive relationships. And make no mistake, gaslighting is not about love. It's about power and control. And a gaslighter is really just someone who needs to feel superior and who manipulates people to further their own agendas.
Absolutely. And when gaslighting, the person typically finds a way to make the victim think she or he is crazy, like Tiffany just noted, using the example of where that gaslighting comes from in that movie. But yeah, you're essentially just gradually starting to question your own reality. And it's really important to know it only works because the person also knows how to appear like a friendly, even loving, concerned friend, lover, work supervisor, political leader, whatever it may be, right? This can happen in any relationship. It's not just a romantic relationship. And that's something that I think we get confused about as well. It's anybody and everybody. I can name multiple people that I've experienced gaslighting with. And I think once you get to know a little more about gaslighting in this episode, because we're going to be talking about, is it intentional? Is it unintentional? Is it always someone that's trying to be abusive? Or is it something that happens just in normal, quote unquote, normal relationships? And we're going to open this whole discussion up. We want to hear from you in the comments. We want to hear from you over on Instagram. We want to hear from you on TikTok, wherever you're seeing the discussion around this podcast. Please subscribe. Please leave comments. Please participate in the conversation, because gaslighting is something that is happening all around us. And it's a really important topic to talk about and be educated about, because this isn't just, and there's no just to it, but this isn't just somebody that's been in an unhealthy relationship. This is happening to everyone. It happens to organizations. It happens in our culture. It happens, I think one of the reasons it's become a hot topic is one side of the aisle was talking about another political person or figure on the other side of the aisle, and it's been thrown out about him frequently, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why gaslighting has become such a hot topic in the last few years. I'm not going to side on that or say either way. That's not our job. But the reason to bring it up and have that be a conversation is because it is being used in our everyday life. And I think it's important that we get educated around what gaslighting actually is.
I think let's talk about some of the feelings you get when you experience gaslighting, because this is just something that happens when our clients come in and they're just trying to figure things out. And so I think it's really helpful to know what that feels like. And two big ones, at least for me, were I was just constantly second guessing myself. I had the hardest time making decisions. So I don't know if that resonates with you, but if it does, that might be something to take a look at.
And that one, that one will actually linger even after the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, just how often do we hear from our clients that they just can't make decisions, or they don't trust themselves to make decisions? We hear it every single day. So that just shows you how powerful this tool is for an abuser. The other one that I feel like was a big one for me was, just this constant ruminating over my character, like being too sensitive, or I'm not a good enough person, or just I'm not good enough. Those things would just really be something that would be constantly spinning for me.
Oh, me too. I mean, I think when I use the example of gaslighting, it's you're too sensitive is probably like the broken record of what I share. I mean, constantly. That was always used against me in multiple relationships, not just one. Just always questioning, like, and it leaves you in a place that's like, okay, I can't even trust my own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it's so true. And yeah, you're too sensitive is something that I hear you share a lot across multiple relationships. So I find that really fascinating. That it's just such a big one that's used against another person.
Right. And I also would say, I think the reason that it ends up, like, if you guys are finding a common theme, this is my theory, is it might have been shared in a vulnerable moment with somebody who just so happens to use those same kind of tactics. Because the odds are, if you haven't done intentional work, which in my past, I mean, I have multiple different relationships, unfortunately, where there's pieces in some of these patterns. And because I hadn't done some of that healing, I ended up in that relationship just with different bags of bones and different, and I think that's super common. And so you may find some of the same repetition, especially if you've shared it in a vulnerable moment. It will probably come back to hurt, like be used against you.
Right. And if you've only been in one relationship, like I was, just kind of take note that it will follow you into the next relationship, meaning your way that you behave around certain things will follow you. So that's really the importance of doing that intentional work.
Yep. I love that. Something else you might notice if you're experiencing gaslighting, you feel confused about your relationship. So, I thought I had this really great partner. I had this really great boss. I had this really great friend, but I just felt crazy all the time around them. Or, I thought this person was extremely charming when they did XYZ, but then sometimes I feel like I'm losing it. Like they'll say something and it doesn't quite match. And I just notice a lot of confusion. And really, this is where getting in touch with your intuition is so important, because if your intuition, if things just don't line up, that might be a sign. Another example of where you might feel it is in a confrontation with the person that you're in the relationship with, or the relationship in question, that might be gaslighting you. You feel like you suddenly find yourself in an argument you didn't intend to have, right? You're not making progress, and you're just saying the same thing over and over again, and you're not being heard.
Yeah. I mean, this one to me was a big one, but I felt like I was in a fog. Like everything was just fuzzy. My thoughts were fuzzy, my feelings, I just didn't know kind of where I was at. Half the time I was just walking around in a fog. So that's a big one. And then the next big one for me was you always are apologizing. And for me, I just, this is always stands out to me, but I ran into a family member, and we were having a conversation, and he told me, he's like, I don't know anybody other than you that says I'm sorry all the time. And he's like, you got to stop. And it made me feel bad that he said that to me. But when I, was able to step back and think about really what that meant, was that, I just needed to do some work, because that gaslighting behavior that was used against me caused me to apologize so frequently for everything. I was just always apologizing. So I was able to step back, look at what it was, and do the work around it so that I don't. And it's funny because Kirsten and I will apologize to each other constantly. And then we stop each other. We're like, stop, but we hold each other accountable for it. But, just recognizing that when you're in an abusive relationship of any type, whether it's with family or friends or, a significant other, this is the stuff that happens. And this is the stuff that, is so important to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the apology piece, I mean, yes, gaslighting could be a sign of gaslighting, but I mean, the apology piece could be just a sign of any sort of abuse, anything. It could be a sign of codependency. It could be a sign of so many different things. So that's why we're giving multiple different, and a lot of what we talk about can cross. So just keep that in mind. If that can be the fruits of multiple different things causing you to get to a place where you're just apologizing constantly. You're frequently making excuses for your partner's behavior. I did this one all the time for multiple, like I said, I can think of multiple different relationships of all kinds, by the way, not just romantic, where this was happening, right? Because you're just trying to figure out what's going on while the gaslighting is happening. But like if somebody didn't want to show up, if there was lying, I would cover like if there was an event we were supposed to be at together, I'd cover for the other person. And I honestly just thought I was being a good partner or friend, because typically there was a story assigned to it, right? Like, oh, I'm not feeling well, or, whatever. And so, and I wasn't sure, I was trying to figure out if that was real or wasn't real, or what the agenda was. And so I would just go with it. So I would be constantly making excuses. You may know something is wrong, but you just don't know what, right? So big piece to gaslighting is it just doesn't feel something that they're saying. This is where one of the key pieces to healing from these type of relationships is getting back connected to your intuitive piece within yourself. And that's why they take advantage of that. They're trying to pull you away from trusting yourself.
If I can just insert a little piece there around making the excuses for your partner's behavior. I know for me, what that looked like was I worked literally from the time I got up to the time I went to bed to make sure that the outside world didn't know what was going on the inside, right? And so part of my making excuses was to make it appear that things were okay. So notice if you're, doing that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it can look like that. It doesn't always look like the straight out piece, but just you trying to cover it up. Yeah. No, and I think so many in our community can relate to that.
Yeah, because I felt like it was a reflection on me. Like if people knew that I was in a relationship that was abusive, then what does that say about me? right? And
Mhm.
so there's just so much to it.
Absolutely. So many pieces to it. And one of them, actually, that kind of leads into this question. So it's one of our most common questions when it comes to gaslighting. And like I mentioned a little earlier, is that we were going to have this discussion, and we'd really like to make this a discussion. So please leave comments in the show notes. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because it is kind of a great debate. I mean, if you go out and you read about gaslighting, is it always intentional? Is it unintentional? Does someone actually know they're gaslighting? And I'd really love to hear what your guys' thoughts and what you've read and your experiences are. I mean, that's why you're here. There's some sort of interest around gaslighting. That's why you're listening to this. So let us know your experience. Let us know what you think. But I actually once heard it compared to murder and manslaughter. They both have the same result, but the intention behind it is conscious or unconscious. So, like how, if there's a death that's caused by another person, if it's intentional, if it was premeditated, right? Murder, typically. If it's somebody that there's an accidental death, but it's still caused by another party, that we consider that manslaughter. Gaslighting just doesn't have the two different terms. But I mean, from research, there's research to support, at least I don't know. I don't know if I would say research to support. There's articles with this opinion. It's seriously a big debate. Like one thing that I read was that intentional gaslighting is actually more rare than unintentional gaslighting. Like I said, I'll let you guys debate that, but just something to consider. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, like, how do they know that? Because you'd have to actually get someone to say what their intentions are in order to actually answer that question. And often that's why they're gaslighting in the first place, right? They're trying to divert. There's an intention underlying is why people gaslight. It's really a hard thing to grasp. And the truth of the matter is if somebody's gaslighting you, in my opinion, Tiffany, I'm going to let you chime in here in just a minute, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I know you have some experiences with, and I do too. I mean, I know when there was an intentional and unintentional experience now looking back, or at least what I perceive to be intentional versus unintentional. But I think what it really comes down to, it doesn't matter if it's intentional or unintentional. If you're on the other side, you're a victim, right? You're still the one that was hurt by this. And it doesn't mean that you have to continue to deal with it. They need help. They need to fix this. It's still not a healthy trait. There's something wrong, and they're pushing their own agenda, and they're not being upfront about it. Some people have just said, well, that's just lying. It's not the same, because it's a consistent over and over tactic. There's still something going on, whether it's intentional or unintentional. I guess that's still to be debated. Yeah. And I don't have the answer for you today. I'm not gonna say one way or the other. I can see why they say that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts were, when we were talking about this earlier, I'm like, gosh, can I like pinpoint when I feel like something was unintentional compared to a relationship that I've had that it was very apparent in, and it was very vindictive and manipulative and all those things. Mm-hmm. And I can think back on a work experience, and honestly, it just didn't give me the same feel that I got in my relationship. So, and it wasn't all the time either. It was just in certain situations. Right. But I love what you said. Like, no matter what, you're still the victim of it, right? Intentional or unintentional. So yeah, I do. I've never thought about it this way. So it's kind of brought, a new light around it for me to think about, which I like.
Yeah, I liked that too. And I use this analogy frequently, and not just with gaslighting, but if somebody kicks you underneath the table, they still hurt you, right? They still typically apologize. They still typically do something to correct the fact that they kicked you under the table. Even if it wasn't intentional, there's still pain, right? You now have a bruise on your shin. Same thing here. It still leaves the piece. That's why the analogy around murder and manslaughter, I thought I really liked that. We just don't have a different word other than conscious or unconscious, gaslighting, and the determination to figure out which is which really that's a tough debate.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about, what do you do if you recognize that someone's gaslighting you? I think the most important thing is that you're aware that there's a problem. That is your very first step. And, once we can put a label on it, we can start to address it specifically. And you're going to hear Kirsten and I talk about the Book of Truths all of the time. We're such big believers in it. And let me kind of, if it's a new concept to you, I'll tell you a little bit about it. You can take a notebook. We'll eventually have something for you. In our Narcissist Survival Guide, I believe there's kind of a guided version of it, or a PDF version of it. And you can get that off our website. But it's just a place for you to write down conversations, for you to print out email and text. You can also do this in your phone. So it doesn't have to be in a notebook form, but for me, that's what was most helpful. For Kirsten, it's digital. She does it digitally, and that works best for her. But whatever you prefer, make sure that you keep that in a safe place. But it's a place that you can write down those things, so that when that other person tells you that it didn't happen, you can go back and go, oh, no, it did. I mean, you're not going to ever convince them, right? But for your own sanity and to keep your thoughts straight, it's a great place to keep that. So I would just always suggest, that Book of Truths if you're going through something like this.
Yep, I love that. And just so you know, we do also have a checklist here in the show notes that you're going to be able to access of what we're talking about, of, what do you do if you recognize that someone's gaslighting you? We have this. So if you're driving, you're doing whatever you're doing and you can't write these down right now, don't worry. They're in the show notes. You can download them and have them emailed to you. No stress. Okay. Because these are powerful tools. And like I said, gaslighting happens to a lot of people. It's in multiple relationships, right? This is one of those things that happens all over the world, and sometimes to societies, to cultures, to multiple different, like I was talking about, politicians. So knowing what gaslighting is a really powerful thing. And so knowing how to combat it is important too. So just make sure you access those. The second one is give yourself permission to feel what you feel, right? I was talking about intuition. It's such a crucial piece, right? Part of the problem with gaslighting is that it results in the victim questioning his or her thoughts, values, perceptions, or feelings. Acknowledge that what you feel is what you feel. No one else can choose that for you. No one else can feel what you're feeling, only you, right? So that you can take whatever action you need to feel better. Pay attention to what's happening. When they say something, what does it feel like? And really start to get to know you. If you're not doing practices to get to that, you can pay it, like that are, how do I say this? Flexing your intuitive muscle, like noticing when somebody speaks to you, how you feel, noticing when you're around certain people, right? I think everyone can notice when I'm around XYZ person, I feel this, because odds are there's something off, right? Start to pay attention to those feelings. Take note of them so that you can use them in other situations.
Yeah. And the next one is, give yourself permission to make a sacrifice or make a change, because up until now, you've been sacrificing everything, right, for another person. But part of what makes it tough for that victim to leave that relationship is because gaslighting plays a big role. But often our abuser is someone we care about. Even though they hurt us, we still care about them. Sometimes it could be somebody you look up to, like a boss or, a friend or something like that. But when you have a relationship with somebody, it's hard to untangle that. And we've talked about other reasons that it's hard to untangle, but, give yourself that permission to make that sacrifice so that you can start to, take care of you. Because for so long, like I said before, you've been sacrificing everything.
Yeah. And remember, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the next one, is you don't need to do it all at once. You can, like I said, number 4 is start making small decisions. Maybe you're going to get out of the relationship, or maybe it's a relationship like you can't get out of right now, right? It might be a boss, or it might be a romantic partner that you're really intertwined with, or maybe it's a friend that you have to see every day because you can't stop them from going to school, right? Like there's so many different places where this relationship can be going on. So just remember, you just need to start with making small decisions. Say no when they're saying something isn't true. Trust your intuition. Try not to engage in an argument, because that's clearly going to be a power struggle, because you have to remember a lot of this is driven by power and to push their agenda. So if you're doing anything to challenge that, that's when more of this is going to happen.
Yeah. And it's okay to get like a second opinion. You can ask a friend or family member that you trust if they think your thinking is as off as your partner is saying it is. You can ask that question. We always tell people to be really careful with who they talk about with certain things, but that's a pretty simple question. You can say, this is what I'm thinking and this is what I said. Does that seem off to you, or does that seem wrong to you? It's fine to ask that.
Yeah. And I mean, I have had, it can look like a professional, right? It might look like working with a therapist, or it might look like working with a coach, or it might look like something like that. But sometimes it's just talking to somebody else that might have a similar relationship with that person as well, that you have and they have. So you can kind of compare notes. Hey, do you notice when this is going on? And like Tiffany said, be careful who you're talking to, because, if there's loyalties, I mean, be smart, right? And be careful what you're saying, because we don't want you to end up causing yourself more harm or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to use those people for sure. And have them in your corner. All right. And the next one is have compassion for yourself. Okay. Don't judge yourself for having these situations. Most people do not even grasp that there's gaslighting going on, and it's happening everywhere. You guys, it really is running rampant. It's trending and it can be used incorrectly, right? But it really does happen more times than not. That's why the question and the great debate of, is it intentional or is it unintentional? Either way, it's happening, and either way, people fall victim to it all the time. Okay. So have compassion for yourself. You're responsible for you. You need to be honest with yourself, and maybe tomorrow your partner will be great, or the person that's gaslighting you, but focus on what you're feeling in the moment and recognize when you're having those feelings, right? And don't judge yourself if you ended up in these relationships, because we always say don't show up from a place of shame, but more of a place of curiosity, so you can continue to move yourself forward. And always, we're here to support you. Right. You can visit therelationshiprecovery.com. Everything's linked here in the show notes, so you can do that too.
Okay. So should we take some questions from the audience?
Yes. No, I love that. We have lots of really great gaslighting questions.
Yeah, we do. All right. I'll start off by asking you, can gaslighting happen in a healthy relationship?
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I wouldn't say it's a healthy relationship if gaslighting is going on, right? But I would say gaslighting can be on a spectrum and can happen in any relationship. If it's happening, there's still the same outcome and damage. But like we talked about, the reason for gaslighting might not be premeditated. It might not be somebody that's really trying to manipulate on purpose, which, I mean, manipulation is typically on purpose. So I might have contradicted myself a little bit there. But my point being is, I wouldn't call it a healthy relationship if this is going on. I think you need to have intervention if you think there's not other red flags. Like if gaslighting is the one thing you're dealing with, or you think it's a result of how the person was raised, or if you think it's a result of something else, you can have intervention. Our next question, if you want to take this one, is if someone is gaslighting you, will it happen again?
I would say definitely yes, because it's such a powerful tool for the abuser. Unless it's one of those unique situations where it's unintended, I would say, it's one of the abuser's best tools, right? So I think that would be a big yes on that for me.
And I think if people are getting what they want out of it, I mean, you're going to continue to do that. If your agenda is working out, of course you're going to keep doing that over and over, and you're getting that from that person. I mean, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question is, can an abuser learn not to gaslight?
So gaslighters can learn to not gaslight if they're willing to do that hard work that we were just talking about, right? They have to break patterns. There needs to be intervention. There has to be a willingness. There has to be an honesty, in my opinion. Like you have to address the fact that you are doing this to push your agenda. There's a reason why gaslighting is going on. This isn't just lying. This is, messing with somebody's head essentially, which is where, I mean, honestly, if there's not a theme in this podcast, you might notice there's the spirit of the debate of intentional or unintentional is very much alive in this podcast. So I'm really excited about those comments because I mean, some of these answers can be very dependent. And I also think this is a great example of there's such a gray area in relationships, right? There's so much of gray. We always are trying to look for this black and white a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it really exists. I think there's a lot of gray. So it might be that they were raised by somebody who gaslit and that's that, and they're mirroring what happened possibly, or had other relationships where it was occurring. However, I do feel like most of the time the person gaslighting is more than likely not going to feel like it's a problem, which can be another problem. So again, you're really going to have to address it situation to situation. If somebody's willing to admit though, hey, maybe I am doing this. And when I read gaslighting, I can see that. That's why it's important for you to keep track of it and use that as, hey, this is what's happening. This is where it happened. This was my real experience. Here is this. We got to do something about this because it's becoming a problem in our relationship. The next one is gaslighting manipulation.
I think it's really important to note that gaslighting is a form of manipulation, but it's not the only type of manipulation. Both gaslighting and other types of manipulation, they are destructive and they can degrade your self-esteem and your self-worth. But when gaslighting is done effectively, it will really, what it does is it's going to damage the trust in yourself and your experience with reality. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's important. I didn't ever really know that there was like a difference there. So I think it is important to know that and know that there's a lot of other, types of manipulation. This is just one form of it.
Again, intentional or unintentional, it's still the same result.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. Next question is, how long does it take to recover from gaslighting?
I don't think there's really a time frame we can put on somebody. Because the other part is too, is you might notice it's more like how you start to notice the results of it, like what has happened to you. And it really depends on the person and if they're willing to do the work. We always talk about quote unquote the work, right? Yeah. It's important, right? And it also depends on if that person gets the right kind of help, right? Are you working with somebody that really knows this area? Because gaslighting is, I would say it's something that's starting to be more understood and seen. I think that is kind of the benefit of it being in kind of the limelight right now. I think it is making it so there is more awareness, but you do have to have somebody that really understands it, and you do need to get the right help. But we do see people recover all the time, but I would never put a time frame on it because it really depends on how long it was going on, what's the circumstance. And you guys need to remember too, a lot of people think that there's a point A to point B, but the healing journey is more about, it's kind of like a roller coaster. There's going to be ups and downs. And as long as you're not stuck upside down, you're doing okay. And that's going to be the same with gaslighting. There's still times Tiffany and I'll speak for myself, but like something might have been said, or I'm thinking about the past and I still have to sit there and kind of like separate it out and go, okay, this was my reality. This is what I was told. If I start kind of feeling that dissonance when I have to deal with something that was in the past, or, from that relationship, and I have to try to cipher it, where I'm at now, every once in a while, I do have to still separate those things. So it's something that once it's happened to you, I think you deal with in some capacity.
Yeah.
Or another.
And I think it's also important to note that, in your beginning of your healing journey, all of this stuff is really intensified and it happens a lot. And as you start to step out, it gets less and less. But honestly, there's still things that have a relation to trauma bonds or gaslighting or, boundaries, codependency, all the things that we talk about that come up for both of us, and we'll actually have discussions with each other around it, which is, fantastic that we can do that. But just note that I guess just this is a really good example of how powerful these things are.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, because that is a perfect example of how powerful it is. And the sad part is this is, I think, the part that really makes me sad around this is it's not something that's openly understood, and it happens openly every day.
Yep.
Right? People experience this all the time, and they just feel crazy or alone because it's not one of those quote unquote like accepted things by society that say this is wrong and this, you should leave the relationship over this, or you can end this relationship because it doesn't check one of the boxes that society says is okay. And really, it should be more about, if it didn't feel good for you, it's not a healthy thing for you in the relationship, then it's okay. That's enough. It's enough if it's not healthy or didn't feel good to you and it left trauma and pain and caused you emotional grief, whatever it may be. That's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So often we hear from people that, just like, for example, well, if he hit me, then I can go. But if he emotionally abuses me, or she, I shouldn't just say he, but if he or she emotionally abuses me, that's not a visible reason, so I can't go. So breaking this down and breaking out of those patterns is so vital. It's so important that we do that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if there's anything you get, even if you're like, I still don't understand gaslighting, but whatever, I really hope you take from this podcast, if something doesn't feel right to you, that's enough, right? That's enough reason to not be in the relationship anymore. You don't need to check the box. Our last question is do you guys only work with gaslighting / narcissistic abuse? No, we work with anything and everything, kind of like what we just said, that if you've been in a relationship and there's turmoil left from it, or trauma, or you just don't feel good about it, or you're not really sure how to move forward, and you've lost sight really of the relationship that you have with yourself due to a relationship, no matter who it's with, friend, family, romantic partner, just anyone in general, and you feel like it's left something and you're not really sure how to move forward, that's who we work with. Anyone and everyone that's just trying to better themselves after a relationship and better their relationships. We work with partners too.
Yeah. And I think, it's important that we remember that those relationships affect every part of our life. So they can affect our career, they can affect, our personal growth. So I think that's kind of the beauty of what we do, is that when we start to help somebody get that relationship back with themselves, we see all areas of their life start to improve. And I think it's kind of a magical journey that we get to go on with people.
It is. And we're honored that you guys are here listening to the podcast. We're honored for the support that we've had so far. Lots of great feedback, lots of requests of what we should talk about. So we're so honored that you spent time with us. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Please subscribe. Please leave your thoughts and feelings and ratings and all of that, because we want to continue to share more around relationship and share more of the relationship recovery. And we'll catch you next time. Hey, thanks for listening.
Don't forget to leave us a review.
For more relationship recovery tips and tools, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and all things social media at The Relationship Recovery.
You can also watch highlights of the show over on YouTube.
If you feel like our podcast is speaking to you, check out our coaching services, courses, bundles, and more at therelationshiprecovery.com.
We'll see you next week.